This is part 2 of History for the Well-Educated Heart. We're on a path less traveled here. In part 1, we covered the roots, understanding why we're doing what we're doing. Today I want to focus on the stems, where I'll give you a system and some tools to work with. Briefly, in review, we're engaged in a study in the art of joyful living, and history is providing much of our study guide. We talked about how childhood is the age for building strong root systems in the heart, and the 4 main nutrients for a strong root system are music, pictures or visual arts, poetry, and story. These are the languages the heart understands. And if you remember, we went through the developmental phases for ensuring the roots are growing deep and strong. Before we continue on the path, I want to give you a brief history of this path we're on. It's a path less traveled, but it's been around since ancient times. In 600 BC, when Jeremiah looked around at the destruction and desolation of his people, he lamented its cause. No man pays attention to heart. In ancient Greece, as an age of reason was taking hold, Plato reminded the people all learning has an emotional base. And Aristotle continued to warn the people, educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. The world entered a dark age, and then the Greek writings resurfaced and ushered in a renaissance of learning. People went crazy about books. Then, in the mid-1700s, Heinrich Pestalozzi arrived on the scene in Switzerland. He was one of the most tender-hearted of souls. What he noticed was that, for all their book learning, the people were miserable. All their learning wasn't making their lives any happier. And the poor, poor children, because the adults wanted them to read all these books, they started drilling them in Greek and Latin almost from the very beginning. Pestalozzi wrote, "Ever since my youth has my heart been moved on, like a mighty stream, alone and lonely, towards my one sole end, to stop the sources of misery in which I saw people around me sunk." And so he started experimenting with new methods for warming children's hearts. He taught, "It is for a long time the business of the heart, before it is the business of reason." He tried his ideas out on a myriad of orphans he took into his care, but he ran into the same obstacles people run into today who try to teach the heart first. School administrators and parents would come into his classroom and say, "Mr. Pestalozzi, where are your test scores? Where are your reading scores?" And he'd say, "But look around. Look how happy and engaged the children are. They're teaching each other." And they'd give him the stern, dismissive look. As he tried to explain his ideas to others, although his heart could see and understand them perfectly, when he tried to explain them with words, thousands of words would start pouring out of his mouth, and the listener would just stare. "What are you talking about?" I have the same problem, and now I hear from moms all the time who have the same problem. When they try to explain the well-educated heart, which their hearts understand perfectly well, the words start pouring out, but the person listening goes, "Huh?" Well, Pestalozzi finally put his ideas into a story, How Gertrude Teaches Her Children, and the ideas started to catch on. His teachings came down to the languages of the heart: music, art, poetry, and story. Only he didn't have any picture books. Hans Christian Andersen hadn't written his fairy tales. There was no Child's Garden of Verses. Beethoven and Brahms had not yet composed their masterpieces. There were no Dickens novels, no Treasure Island or Secret Garden. And one of the greatest frustrations was that the people would try and fit a form and a method to his ideas before they completely understood the spirit behind them. And because they didn't completely understand the principles, the methods would fail, and they'd come back and say, "Pestalozzi, your ideas don't work." No, it wasn't the ideas that had failed. It was the methods. It was the form without the spirit. It's the same problem a lot of our churches are having, where people settle into the outward form of their religions, but they've completely lost the spirit of it. Well, Pestalozzi's influence spread, and his writings inspired the hearts of Charlotte Mason in England, Maria Montessori in Italy, and Rudolf Steiner in Austria, who started the Waldorf schools. They also attempted to clothe the ideas in words and methods, and left behind many writings of their own. Karl Maeser brought them from Germany to Provo, Utah, and planted them in the foundation of my alma mater, Brigham Young University. All these writings provided rich cultural soil that now influenced a whole host of writers and educators in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and they produced volumes and volumes of history and biography, nature, literature, fairy tales, art, music, and poetry that warmed and inspired hearts of children, and they used stories to teach everything. It's known as the golden age of children's literature. Then came the 1920s, and a new age of the mind and intellect was ushered in, and these books and methods of the heart were pushed to the back corners of dusty old libraries until now. The wonders of technology have brought them back into the light for you and I to study and learn from and to teach our children from, and this path less traveled is starting to see new travelers who will clothe the ideas in new words and methods that can now incorporate all that our modern world offers. Pestalozzi gave all that he had to plant these ideas of the heart in the world. Written on his tombstone are the words, "He did everything for others, nothing for himself." His was a lonely, lonely journey. But he said that if it took 300 years for his ideas to take hold, all his suffering and sorrow would not have been in vain. When he died, he was afraid he had failed. Little could he have imagined the influence of his efforts. Thank you, Pestalozzi, for never giving up on your dream. We are the richer for it. So now let's press forward on this path less traveled. You have not been hired as a computer technician. A technician is handed a whole stack of software programs to install on the hard drive. It's monotonous work. A program may have to be installed several times, and sometimes the whole system crashes and you have to start all over again. The programs become outdated almost as fast as they're installed and constantly need to be replaced and updated. No offense to any technicians out there, but technicians are a dime a dozen. Almost anyone can be trained to be a technician. I'll say it again. You have not been hired as a technician. You, as a mother, have been offered the role of artist. The artist's gift is that of stirring hearts and awakening feelings. Your child was formed near your heart, not your brain, as a symbolic reminder of your calling, and an artist is something rare. A seed that is planted in the ground is fully loaded with everything it needs to grow into a flower. The sun may shine on it through cold winter months, but until the sun warms the soil, the life forces within the seed remain dormant and the seed won't grow. Your child also comes to you fully loaded with everything he needs to reach his full potential. You don't need to download programs into him. You don't need to teach him how to talk. You just need to let him hear you talking. You don't need to teach him how to think. You only need to give him things to think about. Your first most important job as an artist is to warm his heart to release the life force and start the growing process. Your continuing role is to water and fertilize the soil from which your growing child will feed. A person who learns the skill of painting is not necessarily an artist. What turns a skilled painter into an artist is a warm and full heart. Only a warm heart can kindle warmth in another. The love of the story you're sharing is even more important than the story itself. If you don't feel that yet, don't beat yourself up. We've grown up in a technician's world, so allow yourself time to warm your own heart, and that can be happening all along the way. I needed to say these things first, because I'm now going to share a system with you. But I don't want you to make the mistake of thinking the system is what the well-educated heart is all about. A system is simply a way of creating order out of your learning. You might end up creating your own system. A technician and an artist can use the same system, but I'm hoping you'll use it as an artist. A curriculum is one kind of system. Anyone who knows me well knows how much I dislike the word curriculum. That's because it has too much of a feeling of force for my free spirit. Curriculums are generally one size fits all. It doesn't take into account the personality of your child, his developmental level, your relationship with him, your personality, the circumstances of your home, or your child's interests. It has more of a technician feel to it. Your child is in the 2nd grade, give him this. It just doesn't sit well with me. I've had people suggest to me to make a curriculum out of what I have. It's so much easier for a mom to wake up in the morning and look at Monday and do exactly what's laid out there. But there's just not much room for artistry in a curriculum. Another popular system is the 4-year rotation schedule, where you study ancient history 1 year, Middle Ages the next, and so forth. This system works well for a lot of people, but I have a problem with it also. Let's say we're studying ancient Greece when my child is 6. I'm limited to teaching him what a 6-year-old mind can grasp. I'll be back in 4 years, but that's a long time in childhood, and I've missed out being able to give him what a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, and 9-year-old mind can comprehend about ancient Greece, keeping in mind those developmental levels. I wanted to create a system that had lots of room for choice and adaptability to children's personalities, something an artist could use. It needed to allow for the stages of development to unfold, and now that our children are connected to the whole world, I wanted to include the whole world in the study. I pictured a giant 5,000-piece puzzle dumped out on the table. How would I go about putting all those pieces together? Well, first I'd look for all the edge pieces to create the framework, and then I'd start putting all the blue sky pieces in one place, and all the red barn pieces in another, and the rose garden in another. When most of the blue sky pieces are in close proximity, my eye can better spot those familiar connecting points that link the pieces together. Why do we work on 5,000-piece puzzles? It's because of this inherent joy we have of linking like things together. When 2 pieces fit just right, we get so excited, and when you find the connecting piece to the framework, hooray! And then this wonderful picture begins to emerge, and we're not satisfied until it's complete. It's this same inherent joy of linking like things together that fuels all our learning. Compare that system I just described to merely dumping the puzzle pieces out and trying to randomly fit them together. I think you'd lose interest real fast. What I'm trying to do is help you piece the world together for your child so he can see and understand his place in it. This is an alternative 12-month rotation plan I've set up for myself. I'm using the study of American history for my edge pieces to frame in my study, and I'll start fitting the world history pieces into the framework. I'll bring all the French pieces together: French literature, French history, French music, French art, famous French people, and so forth into one place so that my heart can start fitting the picture together of France. I'll return to France every year, and each time I return I'll layer in more familiarity and deeper understanding. I'll do the same thing for each of the nations. After I put the framework together, I looked for a connecting piece to link the nations back to the framework. You can see I've spread the study of American history over 12 months, leaving the summer months open. I'll link France to the study of the American Revolution through Lafayette, the young Frenchman who came to America to fight for our liberty and then tried to bring what he saw happening here back to his homeland. It didn't quite have the same results. The link to China and India in month 1 is because that's where Columbus was trying to go. I linked Holland to month 2's study of the Pilgrims because Holland was their first stop. Holland was actually just ending their 200-year run of a republic when we started ours, and our founders looked to their lessons of what went wrong when they set up our republic. And then Holland is linked to Spain because that's whose rule they had to free themselves from, just as we had to break away from England. I know some of you are listening who may live in other countries, and I'll tell you why I recommend this even for you. Most of the nations in the world were formed so long ago, their true origins are buried in myth and legend. We have few facts and few original writings. America is new enough that we can study the birth of a new nation. We have original writings, we have pictures, and we have an extraordinary number of heroes. But even more importantly, America is your story. We are the story of a nation peopled by nations around the world. If you are French, you are part of our story. If you are Chinese, you are part of our story. If you are African or Hispanic or Irish, you play a part in this wonderful story of how people of so many diverse cultures, backgrounds, and traditions came together and formed a new nation. You are a part of our very fabric. E pluribus unum, out of many, one. Your children are our children. And for all freedom-loving people, ours is a story of freedom and the struggle against tyranny, a fight that's gone on since the beginning of recorded history. We are the modern experiment in self-government, and the fight to remain free is happening before our eyes. Each and every country has heroes and wonderful stories for all of us to learn from. This is just a way to organize that learning. Now that we have a system, we need a plan for executing it. This is what I know about meal planning. If I sit down for a few minutes once a week, plan out my meals for the week, and write them on a whiteboard on the fridge, make a shopping list and shop for the week, meal times run smoothly around here and we eat pretty healthy. When I don't plan, 5 o'clock rolls around, I start flipping through the recipe books, realize I have to go to the store and buy ingredients, and end up ordering pizza. And I feel frazzled. My suggestion to you is that you set aside an hour or so near the beginning of the month and plan out your learning menu for the month. It will make life so much easier. Pull out a piece of paper and fold it in 5 columns and label the columns books to buy, books to get at the library, online books, books I own, and shopping list. Now let me walk you through the kind of thought process that goes on in planning for the upcoming month and introduce you to some of the resources you have to work with. My family's all grown up, so I'm using an imaginary family of lots of kids of different ages. Of course, you'll adapt it to the personality and circumstances of you and your family, because, remember, you are an artist. A lot of these ideas are ideas I have borrowed from my daughter that have worked well for her in her home. Just a word of caution. Too much water rots roots, and too much food causes indigestion. It's possible to give your children mental indigestion because jewels are very rich foods. There's an art that comes with experience of knowing how much to give them, and you'll want to allow time for digestion. So start simple. Also, include your children in the choosing process as much as possible. If you have a strong, motivated reader, show him these steps and then let him map out his own month. Eventually, that's where you want all your kids to be. If you go to welleducatedheart.com, then look for the resources page. Almost everything here is free. I try to anticipate the supplies an artist would need. The first thing that I want to do in a monthly planning session is to check out the monthly newsletter. You can have it emailed to you, or you'll always find them posted here on the resources page. You'll see it there in the bottom left column. This gives you a quick overview of the month's topic. I'm imagining we're planning for month 5, and we're going to be studying about Lafayette and the American Revolution, and I just mentioned its connecting puzzle piece to France. I've also linked Switzerland because for a time it was under French rule, and Canada because the French first settled there. I can pull from any of these topics. What you will find in the newsletter are some ideas to get you thinking and quick suggestions for books. I'm going to keep in mind where my children are in the developmental chart and start looking for books and activities that I think are the right fit and will interest the personalities of my children. I'll start jotting them down. Do I need to look for the book at the library? Do I want to own a copy? Is it available online to read, or do I already own it? My daughter has a basket that she starts collecting the books for that month's reads. Next, I go to the Story Resource Guide, which you can download a free copy of here at the top of the left column. It may be helpful to capture the vision of what this is by telling you that when I do my menu planning, I pull out just 2 cookbooks that I put together that has all our family favorite recipes. It narrows down the choices so my planning goes much faster. Anything I pick, I know my family will like. That's way easier than pulling out 15 cookbooks of unknown recipes. And then I can add in a recipe here and there when I see something that looks good on Facebook or Pinterest and I want to try it. This story resource guide is designed to be a family favorite cookbook of books, so you don't have to pull ideas out of the air. I constantly scour book recommendation lists where I notice the favorites that keep popping up, and I included books that I have personally read and recommend. I'm always looking for the best of the best. As you go through the guide, you'll notice that most of the books were written before 1960. That's because the 60s is when my generation threw out all the rules of right and wrong. I'm not saying nothing worthwhile was written after that, but the waters are more dangerous. I know these choices that I'm giving you are going to be wholesome food for young souls. I'm always trying to improve things, so an updated version will be out this summer, and I have more titles to add, but this one will work for now. The middle column has books that should be available in your library, or that you can get on an interlibrary loan, or even find an inexpensive copy to buy. Because these are long-standing favorites, there's a really good chance your child will enjoy just about anything you pick on the list that is suited for his age. There are no wrong choices. If a child doesn't like it, just put it aside. There are lots of other choices, and don't be surprised if in a year or two, when he's developmentally ready and his familiarity with new subjects increases, it becomes a favorite. I don't expect your child to read every book on the list, but some will. The Childhood of Famous Americans is a series from the 40s and 50s. In my imaginary family, I have a 7-year-old girl who I think will enjoy hearing about Molly Pitcher or Betsy Ross. She's at the age when she likes to hear about other children. After I tell her a little bit about each of these ladies, I'll ask her which one she'd like to learn about, and I'll make sure I have a copy of the book for her. I mentioned the Landmark series yesterday, and so I'll ask my 11-year-old if he sees anything that looks interesting, or I'll make some suggestions, and I'm going to write those titles on my library list and see if I can get them there. You'll notice my book house listed on the column. In the column. This is a wonderful set of out-of-print books that you can find on eBay or book sales. It started out as 6 volumes in the 1920s, and it's grown into 12 volumes over the years. This is the 1972 version that I reference, and it's filled with short, wonderful, high-interest stories that make a great grab-and-read option when you have 10 minutes while you're waiting for dinner to finish cooking, or your child wants a story while she's folding laundry. The volumes are arranged developmentally, which means the lower numbers are going to have rhymes and stories for your youngest children. Then there are fairy tales and imaginative stories, and the higher numbers have stories of people for older children. So that will quickly help you match the story to the child. Looking down at France, I remember I have Babar and Madeline picture books that my 4-year-old will like. And here's a biography of Louis Braille I want to read aloud. I remember seeing a Pinterest idea of letting kids create Braille words by gluing split peas on a page. So I'm going to put split peas on my shopping list. The left-hand column has the Forgotten Classics. These are the books I described earlier from the golden age of children's literature, and without access to them, I wouldn't be out here talking about the well-educated heart because there wouldn't be enough good stories to draw from. You may have noticed publishers aren't really interested in publishing children's history books anymore because they aren't exactly big sellers. But in this online library, you will find a great treasury of stories from history and much more that will inspire and warm your children's hearts. This is where I found the stories of Newton and Telemachus that I read to you in the part 1. These stories are loaded with gems and wisdom. The writing may feel a little rich at first, but keep reading them aloud and it will soon feel very comfortable and natural. As a bonus, as you read these books aloud, your children are going to develop an extraordinary vocabulary. And the best news is they are free. I've spent the last several years searching, selecting, and organizing, and I've put together an online family library for you with over 2,000 books so far. Before I take you on a little tour, can you see the letter and number references such as W5 or F5? I'll show you what that means. If you go to the online library at welleducatedheart.com, you'll see 6 images like this. Picture these as 6 library rooms. The Freedom Series room has books all about American history. The World History room has world history books. Great Lives or biographies. Nature, Art, and Music has Nature, Art, and Music. And the Story Hour room is designed primarily for children under the age of 8. And the other room currently has classic books and other titles that don't fit anywhere else. Each room has a letter under it. So the F tells you to go into the Freedom Series room, or the W would tell you to go into the World History room. In this room, there are 12 bookshelves that you can see correspond with each month in the 12-month rotation schedule. The number 5 tells you to go into the number 5 bookshelf. And here you can see some options for month 5, organized by elementary, middle, and high school to help you find something for the level of your child. Remember, because a child's listening comprehension exceeds his reading comprehension, a lot of books in the elementary library are there because I judge them as appropriate for a read aloud, and not necessarily because a child that age will be able to read it to himself. But you are the best judge. As you click on each of these titles, they're going to take you into Internet Archive, where you're going to be able to read the books just like a book on your tablet. So now I'm going to jot down some choices for this month in the online section on my planning sheet. Here's a story of Lafayette I want to read to my 10-year-old. I'm going to see if my 7-year-old likes A Little Maid of Ticonderoga. I think my teenager may really like The Watchfires of '76 that has true-life accounts of fighting in the Revolutionary War. Now I'm going to switch over to the World History room, W5, and take a look around. Here's a picture book about France. I'm going to take a quick glance at it. Ooh, I like the pictures, and it's a poem. I think my younger kids will really like that. And our little French cousin will show them what it was like to be a child in France. My teen is ready for an overall history of France, which you can't see because I can't get down on the page. But I think Mary McGregor's looks like a good one, and I also think he may be interested in this story of Napoleon. I'll let him choose. I always want to have a good family read-aloud classic for bedtime. I could choose between Heidi, Swiss Family Robinson, or Anne of Green Gables this month. All good choices. But I think I'll go with Heidi this time, just 'cause. I think my teen will enjoy Tale of Two Cities or Count of Monte Cristo or maybe Les Mis. So many good choices. I'll let him decide. Now going back to the story resource guide, it reminds me about fairy tales up there in the top left-hand corner. I have children in the imaginative years, so I'm going to go into the S3 library and check out the French fairy tale books to see which one I think is the most age-appropriate for my children. While I'm looking over the table of contents, I'm making a mental note of familiar stories that I didn't realize were French. Beauty and the Beast, Sleeping Beauty, and Cinderella. Back to the story resource guide, I notice one more thing. One of my sons is in that action hero stage, And I can see there's an epic hero for France this month, Roland. It's in the S5 library, so I think we'll take a look at that book. I may just have to read a couple of chapters to get him going, and then he'll probably finish it on his own. Now I notice several short stories of famous people that I can use to start introducing lives to my over 8-year-olds. If there is a dash and another number after the G1, for instance, G1-313, that alerts you that that particular story is in one of the books we publish. When we first started doing this, the tablet hadn't been invented. Did you know tablets have only been around 5 or 6 years? Anyway, I knew moms probably wouldn't gather their kids around the desktop, so I started pulling favorite, high-interest stories out of the books and compiling them in volumes, and this is our Forgotten Classics Family Library, which is available for purchase. There are over 75 books in the library altogether, including 12 volumes of a Mother's Learning Library, where you can learn more about educating children's hearts from these heart specialists of 100 years ago. I've been working on this project for almost 10 years, and I have just a handful of books to finish formatting, which will happen by July, and then it's done. Phew! As I was preparing this library, the governing thought I had in my head was, if this little library was the only library of books I had to work with, would it be enough to grow a strong root system in my children? I wanted to give moms a strong foundation in American history and world history, in nature, art, and music. I wanted to give her a variety of picturesque stories of great men and women that would appeal to different age levels, and to introduce her young children to great literature. As I perused thousands of books, I especially looked for stories that were loaded with gems of wisdom. What Charles Eliot attempted to do for adults with his 5-foot shelf of Harvard classics, I have attempted to do for young people. And on a personal note, I have felt unseen hands guiding me to books and stories I never would have found on my own. Each book is tied into one of the shelves in the online library. For instance, when you get done with the stories in the bird book, you'll find more stories of birds in the online library. If you finish stories of inventors, you'll find more stories of inventors in the online library that corresponds with that book, and so forth. It's really offered to you as a convenience, a book-in-hand option, but you certainly don't have to buy them to do all that I'm describing. You can find all the stories in the online libraries. And even if you don't own these books, the names I list will give you some hints of biographies you may want to search for on your own. Again, I'll be updating the story resource guide this summer to reflect all the stories in the printed books. They're not all in there yet, but they will be. So, back to my imaginary planning session. I think I'll introduce my children to the French artist Millet this month, and I'll pick 4 of his paintings for some picture talk, 1 a week. I don't have to choose all the other people I want to introduce. I'm just making a mental note of who's there, and will fill in with stories throughout the month. Now there's one more column in the story resource guide, the right column, and this has the movies. Hollywood has actually made some really great movies, especially the classics. And if kids have very limited screen time, watching an old Hollywood movie can be entertaining and interesting, and they help to deepen impressions and bring to life what they are studying. Of course, you'll want to check out movies you're not familiar with at imdb.com or something like that to make sure that they're appropriate for your family. In my imaginary family, I've decided to have a Tuesday afternoon at the movies and a Friday family night at the movies. So I'm going to pick, or have my kids help me pick, which movies we want to watch. I'll make sure that if I can't stream it, that I can find a copy of it, and I'll add that to my list. Now I'm going to go to the Story Club, which you will find at the top of the right column of the resource page, where there are all kinds of fun things to add variety and interest. I called it a club because I looked for activities that could be fun for kids to get together with other kids to do. For instance, there are plays they can put on or games to play, but the ideas certainly work fine for families. Here are some music options that tie into the month. Here's one that includes scenery of France. I think my little ones will especially enjoy Saint-Saëns' Carnival of Animals. And here's classic French music I think they'll enjoy while they're working on their notebooks. Look, here's Tchaikovsky's Sleeping Beauty ballet. Wouldn't my little budding ballerina have fun dancing to that after we read Sleeping Beauty? I think I'm going to devote the last week of the month to French culture. We'll find France on the map, sing their national anthem. I think you get to know a lot about the spirit of a people from their national anthem. We'll learn a few French words, play a French game, and read Our Little French Cousin. You'll find links for these here on the Story Club page. I'll have my kids look over the craft Pinterest page and choose a craft or two they'd like to make, and I'll jot the craft supplies we'll need on my shopping list so that we'll have them on hand when we're ready to do it. I noticed some traditional French music I can play while they're working on their crafts. At the end of the week, maybe we'll put on a checkered tablecloth on the table, light some candles, play some French cafe music, and eat a nice dinner of French foods. There are recipes to choose from on the Pinterest pages, too. We'll take a picture of us with our crafts and our French dinner and put it in our Family World Culture notebook. Mine is arranged alphabetically by country, and I call it Around the World. I'll ask who will be willing to copy our favorite French recipes to hold on to. And I'll ask someone else to copy the French words we learned. Were there any fun holiday traditions we want to remember? Someone could make a page about them to add to the notebook, too. And we're planning a vacation to France in our dreams, so as we run into interesting places we want to visit, we create pages with pictures and add the interesting details of that, too. If this feels overwhelming, don't panic. I'm just throwing out ideas. There's absolutely nothing written in the Mother's Handbook that says you have to do crafts or throw French dinners. There are no have-tos here. I'm just painting a picture of possibilities. Some of you are wondering about the pictures for your notebooks. I'm in the process of pulling the illustrations out of the old books and shrinking them down 6 to a page. Oh, there's our French dinner I forgot to give you. Shrinking them down 6 to a page so that they're the right size for notebooking and easy for you to access. And there's my Around the World notebook. Here's the 6 pictures. I'll be posting these on the Story Club page as well, but you can also go into our Fine Art Library here on our resources page, which you'll see in the left column. I have over 2,000 fine art images that are organized by family and nature topics for your little ones. And down here at the bottom, I've organized historical and national images by month. That's where I pulled out the Colosseum pictures. You can print them out from there. I also look for old textbooks and cut the pictures out and organize them by month in a little file like this. Or you can look online. Now I have one more stop to make in my planning session. My home library is organized around the 12-month schedule, so all my books about the American Revolution and France are together in one place. I love shopping used book sales. Obviously, I'm kind of ridiculous. And I pick up some really great finds. And by the way, you'll want to make sure you stock your home library with quality books along the way, because once you get your children's hearts warmed up, they'll work their way through them like the hungry, hungry caterpillar. I'm going to see if there's anything there that I want to throw in the basket this month. Here's a beautifully illustrated book of Sleeping Beauty. The text looks a little bit over my little ballerina's head, so I'm going to just let the pictures talk and tell the story from the pictures. Then she'll be able to do that on her own too. Can you feel the difference between the illustrations of these two versions of Sleeping Beauty? Pay attention to the illustrations you're putting in your home library and seek out the best. I also see I picked up this illustrated version of Longfellow's poem Evangeline. I'm going to put that in the basket. I've got the original poem on my shelf too. I think I want to read that myself, so it's going in the basket too. And here are 3 books about Joan of Arc, an illustrated copy, a signature biography, and Mark Twain's personal recollections of Joan of Arc. I think we'll read the illustrated one this year, but I want to pause and make an important point here. You may wonder, why do I need 3 Joan of Arc books? When you are reading for facts, one time through Joan of Arc's story is all you need. You could have a child write a report, post her on a timeline, and check her off the list. But when you're studying for your heart, it's a completely different matter. The first time through, you listen to the story because you want to know what happens. The next time, you already know what happened, but you're back because you want to feel all those feelings all over again. You want to feel her courage against the injustice, her faith, and her unwavering determination. But this time, your heart hungers to feel it on a deeper level. So you seek out a book that gives more details, that shows your heart the story from a new angle. And you keep returning to her story each time, gaining new insights until her story is woven deeply into your heart. Then, all you have to do is see her story on your bookshelf, and you feel an instant connection to all those impressions and feelings without even opening the book. Imagine a whole library built of such friends. As I keep saying, heart education unfolds line upon line, layer upon layer, here a little and there a little. The heart requires weaving many stories together to see a complete picture. You cannot see the pattern of a tapestry from a single strand. We have an example of story weaving in the 4 Gospels of the New Testament. Matthew wrote to persuade the Jews that Jesus was the promised Messiah. Mark appealed to the Gentiles with fast-moving, picturesque accounts of Jesus' doings. Luke was a physician and gave a more polished account, primarily to the Gentiles, but to the Jews as well. And John wrote to an already believing audience and focused on Jesus' divine nature. Only by weaving all 4 accounts together can you gain the most complete picture. So back to our monthly planning session. Now you've got your pockets loaded with jewels, and you're like the fairy godmother, watching for opportunities to gift them. Learn to rely on that Spirit, as Job taught, that giveth you understanding and will help you. It's common among homeschool moms to constantly feel like life is getting in the way of school. I'd like to make the suggestion that you reverse that and make sure that school isn't getting in the way of life. Remember, the objective here is to seamlessly weave life and learning together into one whole in childhood. So my next step in my planning session is to pull out a monthly calendar and start filling in all the activities I know are happening: doctor appointments, music or karate lessons, outings, field trips, and so forth. I'll start making mental notes to myself which jewels in my pockets might fit in. For instance, what can I take along to the doctor's office while we're in the waiting room? What can we listen to on the way to karate, and so forth? My daily goal is to gift my children with at least a few lines of a poem, some music, a story, and something beautiful to look at. Goethe's 4 Jewels for Happy Living. Just one story, one poem a day becomes thousands of stories and poems stored up in a child's heart before he leaves home. If I at least did that much, I'm doing something lasting and worthwhile. These jewels don't make up much room in your day schedule. I'm going to pencil in a poetry tea time every Thursday afternoon. That's where I'll share the Evangeline picture book, and I'll probably include Malay and his paintings while we're enjoying our snacks. I'll post a copy of the painting on the fridge afterwards so they can look at it all week, and then I'll store it in a notebook for them to look at whenever they want. I'll jot down a reminder that Tuesday afternoons and Friday nights are movie times, and I'm going to mark down that I've chosen the last week of the month to be our French Culture Week. That's it for the calendar. I'll now go online and reserve or request my library books and place my Amazon orders. I've got my shopping list I'll take with me next time I'm out, and now I'm ready for the month. So, how does this unfold in the normal course of a day? I proceed cautiously because this is going to look differently in every single home. It's purely offered to get ideas flowing. But this is what I am going to plan on. Well, we always eat breakfast and lunch, so I'm going to attach a story to each one. I think I'll attach a fairy tale to breakfast. It's primarily for my imaginative child, but everyone can listen. My toddler may wander off, and that's okay. My teen will probably stick around because no one's too old to enjoy a well-told fairy tale. In fact, I may see if my teenager will take a turn reading one. With the fairy tale fresh in their minds, my imaginative kids will run off for free playtime. They may want to draw the fairy tale, or maybe they'll play dress up and act it out, or maybe they'll pull out the blocks and create a fairy castle and reenact the story. Don't assign it, for heaven's sake. Force always kills the fun. But with an imagination stocked well with stories, imaginative play is the natural course of action. It's how a child digests the story. Play is the work of childhood. Unstructured, free, wonderful play. Don't get in the way. While they're off playing, older children will engage in their projects. I may sit down and ask my 8-year-old if he wants to hear about the story of Roland while he's building with his Legos, or I'll watch for an opportunity to read the story of Lafayette to them. If they have something to keep their hands busy, all the better. Or I'll play music while they're working on their notebooks. Maybe I'll ask a child to read to me while I'm fixing lunch, or I'll ask if they want me to read to them while they're making their bed or folding their clothes. And we'll definitely want to sing while we work. That used to be so common for families to sing while they worked. It adds the sparkle to what they're doing. The work around home doesn't need to be a dreaded chore that has to get done before we can do anything else. It's part of life. It's ongoing. It's never done. Teaching children the art of making a home is one of the great life gifts you can offer them, and it can be happening throughout the day. Making a bed by itself may be a chore. Running outside and picking a flower to put next to it turns it into an art. When I'm nursing the baby, I can see if my 4-year-old wants to sit next to me, and we'll watch one of the music videos together on my tablet. If I've stocked my house with games and creative and appealing learning materials, mostly I need to get out of the way. I've watched this with my daughter's little girls. The 6-year-old will pull some books out and start copying words because her heart decided that's a good thing to do. Or her 4-year-old just recently came to her mom and said, "Mom, will you teach me how to read?" That's a whole different scenario than Mom saying, "Okay, you're 4. I'm now going to teach you how to read." I can tell you how that would go over with her 4-year-old. Boredom is the friend of imagination and initiative. Don't take the role of entertainer and cruise director. Avoid structuring every moment. It is healthy for children to feel some control over their lives. And don't constantly ask them questions. The heart does some of its deepest work in silence. I know we're going to eat lunch every day, so I'm going to add a story about nature to lunch most days. I know nature is on the heart-based science thread, but I just wanted to remind you that it's still there. Just one story's good. Then I'll send them out to play and digest it. If you happen to notice the dandelion springing up in the grass, let that story be about a dandelion. Don't assign them to go out and find a dandelion and write up a report. Just send them on their way, and you'll likely hear, "Mom, guess what? We found a dandelion, and look!" And they'll retell you the things they just heard in the story. Or maybe you told them a story about ants, and they'll find an anthill and lie down on their stomachs and watch it for a long time because you've given their hearts something to watch for. And now they'll really remember it because they're seeing it with their own eyes. I got a call from my granddaughter last week. She was quite upset about the insect book I just finished publishing and sent her. "Grandma, that book you sent me is wrong." She had gone straight to the chapter on praying mantises because she had recently sent away for some praying mantis eggs which had hatched and she was watching them grow. She said, "The book says they don't use their front legs and that they move slow. That's not how they are at all. I've been watching them, and they use all their legs, and they move fast." She said she almost put the book away and didn't want to read any more, but then she decided to keep going and learned a lot of interesting new things. My reply to her was this: "Aren't you so glad you learned that everything you read in a book isn't necessarily true? I'm so glad that you used your own eyes to observe and know for yourself, and that you kept reading because you learned some new things to watch for." She agreed, but it left me thinking. I know the person who wrote that book was someone who had also watched praying mantises. Maybe we'll find out when my granddaughter's mantises get older. They will stop using their front legs and slow down. But that's not the point. The point is, it's our experiences and our own observations in life that will give proof to the things we're reading in books. This is the digestion process. Life and learning cannot be separated if we want real learning to happen, especially in childhood, and especially in the study of history, or the study of lives as we're doing in, obviously, nature. How sad for the child who only knows nature and people through books. Older kids will probably stay inside and read something that's interesting them, or work on their math or whatever. When the younger kids come back inside, some will hopefully take a nap, or I can encourage quiet activities. Every day will probably look different. Life is like that, full of variety, and you know what they say, variety is the spice of life. Going grocery shopping with you and watching how you engage with the grocer and other people is school. Helping you cook is school. Helping you do the laundry is school. Helping you plant flowers is school. Starting hobbies is school. Making and taking cookies to the widow down the street is school. Sitting and being quiet sometimes is school. Because life is school in childhood. And in some magical way that nature has provided for, all those childhood academics that you're tearing your hair out trying to get your kids to do will happen naturally all along the way. I'm watching it happen with my own grandchildren. And now I just want to add in one more thing, the golden hour of the day. If there is 1 hour in the day that is worth all the others to reclaim in your life, it's the family story hour just before bedtime. Do whatever you can to protect it. This is the hour I reserve for the family classic. I'm going to choose books like Heidi and The Secret Garden and Understood Betsy and Swiss Family Robinson, because these books all impress upon children's hearts what strong family relationships look like, how loving families treat each other. The books don't all start out that way, but in the end, strong bonds of love overcome all the challenges and difficulties. These families all look different. Some are with a grandparent and others with an aunt and an uncle. Many of the families are in crisis. But the underlying spirit of the story is always bonds of love will see us through. And these stories begin to suggest to children's hearts ways to spend their time. They show children what life looks like. Such vital impressions for young hearts. And then you can add in other works of literature as your children get older. I love the story of Maria von Trapp from The Sound of Music. Here's a gem I copied down when I read her story. After supper came the most beautiful time of the day, the evenings spent together. A fire was lit in the fireplace. The older girls brought their knitting, the younger ones their dolls. The boys and their father usually worked on wood, carving or whittling, and I, settling in a most comfortable chair, started to read aloud. It is most amazing how much literature you can cover during the long winter evenings. We read fairy tales and legends, historical novels and biographies, and the works of the great masters of prose and poetry. And then they'd sing. After you finish reading, tuck your children in bed with beautiful scriptural language floating through their heads, and a prayer, and a sense that home is good. I love how it smells. I love how it feels. And I love my family. Life is good. Life is happy. At least that's how it unfolds in my dreams. And if you dream enough, sometimes dreams come true. And so go your days and your month is over. You may still have jewels in your pocket that never got handed out. That's okay, because you're going to be back again next year and the year after and the year after that. And each year you'll know more, and so will your children. No worries. It's a journey, not a destination. and this journey is going to look different for every one of you. I'm sure I've stirred up more questions than I've given answers to, but let me anticipate a couple of them. Does this mean I have to keep rereading the same books to every child as they move through the developmental stages? No. Many books serve the same purpose, and you want to customize the choices to the personalities and developmental of each level of each child. As your children get older, they may love to read their favorites to younger siblings, and in so doing they'll pick up things they missed the first time through. Encourage them to do that. If I'm reading Lafayette to my 10-year-old, should I exclude the other kids? Not at all. They self-select. Your 4-year-old will probably wander off and play. That's so boring, which happens to be your clue that you've chosen a book at the wrong developmental level for that child. But you never know what may connect to them. One mom said she had an 18-year-old with no interest in family reading time, so she just read Story of Lafayette to the other kids. One day she started to read, and her 18-year-old called down from upstairs, "Whoa, are you reading Lafayette? Wait for me, I want to see what happens." Use the developmental chart to help you narrow down your choices. That's all. And then understand this isn't like grade level stuff. If you are thinking grade level, you are thinking like a technician. If you zoom in too close to an image, all you see are the pixels. You have to zoom out to see the whole picture. Our technician world teaches you to analyze. You need to allow the artist within you to feel. These are just general guidelines. If you have a 13-year-old who missed all these stages, you haven't ruined his life. Start where you are. Think familiar first. What's familiar to him that you can connect to and build from? Or maybe you need to bring him in contact with things to expand his familiarity range. And just because age 8 is a good age to introduce King Arthur doesn't mean that you'll never read King Arthur stories at any other age. It's just that a 4-year-old probably isn't going to be interested yet. Neither can you hand a book of history to a 14-year-old and expect him to care about it if you don't pick up some shorter stories to kindle the desire first and to feed the imagination. I hope that makes sense. Next question. But if I don't give my children tests, how will I know if they're progressing? Remember, the root growing process takes place underground where the eye cannot see. If you pull them up to measure them, you'll kill the plant. You have to trust the process. But there are indicators you can watch for. Here are some I have personally observed. You know things are progressing well when your little girl runs in the house out of breath and says, "Mom, Mom, the red rose opened and it's so beautiful." Or you get a phone call, "Grandma, I just found this poem and I love it so much. I've just got to read it to you." Or your 11-year-old and 6-year-old beg you to wake them up at 5 in the morning when Daddy leaves for work because they're working on a project together and they want more time to finish it. These are the signs that you have started to build a beautiful kingdom within their hearts, loaded with enough jewels to live a joyful life. Because you have grown a deep root system in rich soil, their plant of learning will thrive long enough to bear fruit. And now, one more reason why that fruit is so vital. It is only within the fruit that you find the seeds that will continue to multiply and replenish the earth. If a plant never bears fruit, it will wither and die unto itself. But as Luke wrote, "A good man out of the good treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is good." Luke was a physician. He knew how to heal the world. And Robert Louis Stevenson wrote, "Every heart that has beat strong and cheerfully has left a hopeful impulse behind it in the world and bettered the condition of mankind." I've only been able to give you a glimpse of this path less traveled. But let me say this. If heart-based learning resonates in your heart and you want to incorporate it in your home, I suggest a gradual change while you are learning. The hardest diet for me to maintain is the one where I throw out all the familiar foods in my kitchen and try to incorporate a whole new eating lifestyle at once. That's a recipe for disaster that I can't maintain. Gradual changes work best. Start adding in the jewels to your day as you feel comfortable and it feels familiar to you. Read aloud a little more. Play a little more classical music. Read a little more poetry. Spend more time in nature. Play more games together. Be mindful of each moment and find the joy in simple things. And use the summer months ahead to declutter and simplify your life by clearing out the junk if that's a problem, and start warming your own heart. The more jewels in your heart, the more they will flow out naturally and effortlessly. I can show you the path, but no one can walk it for you. Like I keep saying, matters of the heart cannot be taught directly. Each individual heart has to do its own construction work from impressions gathered along the way. None of us can take in the whole of anything in one step. But I have good news for you. A couple of wonderful moms in our group contacted me. These are busy moms just like you, with lots of kids of different ages, but they wanted to help moms who are just starting the journey. They were public school teachers who felt that nagging feeling that something was missing. When they heard about heart-based learning, it resonated in their own hearts, and they told me they threw out everything they ever learned about teaching, and they started on this new path that has required them to let go of old ways and look at learning through completely new eyes. They said it has freed them from so much worry and anxiety in teaching their own kids and has changed their lives. They thought moms might appreciate a little hand-holding in the beginning, or at least a little company, and so they created a simple 6-week online introductory class for busy moms to help you get started. You will love these ladies and what they've put together for you. I am so grateful for them. You can sign up for it. It's free at welleducatedheart.com on the training page. It's the Right Heart class that you see in the middle at the left of the page here. And these sessions will be starting regularly. Even though it requires time and effort to become an artist, you'll soon discover it's not rocket science. Your job is to warm hearts, supply good nutrients, and then get out of the way. Be patient with yourself and give yourself time to grow. It's a joyful journey, and it's worth it. You'll also notice a discussion board and Facebook group on the same page that I invite you to join. And then at the bottom of the page, you'll find monthly topics and study guides to deepen your understanding, layer upon layer, of course. I'd like to close now with a little James Whitcomb Riley and the treasure of the wise man. Oh, the night was dark, and the night was late, and the robbers came to rob him. And they picked the locks of his palace gate, the robbers that came to rob him. They picked the locks of his palace gate, seized his jewels and gems of state, his coffers of gold and his priceless plate, the robbers that came to rob him. But loud laughed he in the morning red, for of what had the robbers robbed him? Ho, hidden safe as he slept in bed when the robbers came to rob him, they robbed him not of a golden shred of the childish dreams in his wise old head. And they're welcome to all things else, he said, when the robbers came to rob him.